This year, I participated in an event called February, Figure Drawing Month, where you complete a figure drawing session every day of February. I used the Croquis Cafe video sessions on Vimeo, though I accidentally started on the videos from last year, so they look a little bit different from all the other ones that are in the 2020 tag, but I started with it, so I finished with it. Croquis Cafe is an excellent resource for figure drawing, so if you are wanting to do that, they have plenty of recorded sessions there for you to check out. They're also partnered with a YouTube channel called Love Life Drawing, who had video lessons, quite short, but just like 1 point a day. It was quite easy to follow along with and improve a certain thing as you go along, so that was really helpful. And all of my final results are up on Instagram. If you want to go check those out, there'll be a link in the description. But here are my main takeaways from the experience. The number one is tools matter. I chose a sort of facsimile of like a dry ink brush to do all my drawings in, and I figured sticking with one tool will let me focus on just the figure drawing itself instead of like learning to use a new tool properly. And I was kind of right in that I sort of learned how to use it to its best capabilities, but because it's an ink brush, there are certain things that it just can't do, like tone or soft lines. You can get sort of a thin, rough, textured thing if you don't push very hard, but it's not really close to like a very low opacity. So while I think it turned out fine in the end, I think next time if I had to do it again, I would pick a tool that is a bit more flexible and has the capability of doing those soft lines and halftones and such. Or just, you know, pick a couple of different tools that I can very quickly switch between. And now I'm going to go over a few things on technique and the pain of outlining. It wasn't really that painful, but there's something people do quite often when they're starting figure drawing where they sort of, instead of going for like the overall gesture or setting out some blocks and then working up from there, they try and do like one part quite detailed and then sort of, you know, if you start at the arm, then you go down the arm, get to the shoulder, do the head, do the torso, go down to the legs. And that tends to do a couple of things. One, it makes proportions quite difficult to get because you're only focusing on like one part of the body at a time. When you zoom out at the end, things can be quite off in their placement as tiny mistakes add up when you're not looking at the drawing as a whole. That also sort of sucks for the time limit because every line has to be like a final line. So if you start doing things with quite a high level of detail and worrying about all the anatomy and stuff, you kind of have to keep that going for the whole drawing. And if you start off with too much, you're just not going to be able to get finished in the time limit. And there's a few things I did to combat this. One, I just paused the pose so I could complete it with my desired level of detail. That's probably the one I did the most often. There was a lot of pausing so I could just get each line exactly right because I only really had one shot at it. And if you are going to do that sort of thing, it helps to start with one really key major stroke and then use that as a foundation and a reference point for all the other marks that you make after that. It means that you can get a semi-accurate drawing while not needing to make guidelines or blocking in like the gesture first. But because you're using that one line as a reference for everything else, if you get it wrong, the whole picture can get kind of balked pretty quickly. So gotta keep an eye on that and make sure that the results are actually looking like the reference. Another thing I did is just lining one side of a shape and then leaving the rest to the viewer's imagination. As long as there's an indication, like slightly, of what's supposed to be on the other side, either another line that gets broken in a certain place or like a little start before it peters out, there's enough information that the viewer can fill in the blanks and it looks, I don't know, I kind of like it. And 3 is just being fine with doing a bad drawing and just have like recognize that it's a tiny step on the road, and it doesn't have to be a good final product to be a worthwhile exercise. More technical stuff I like doing. Simplification. I think that was one of the most gratifying parts of this exercise, was breaking these figures down into very simple lines and shapes and deciding what was important and what could be blended together and what could be just ignored completely. Some of my favorite pieces are ones where I just left large chunks of it out, like I mentioned before, just leaving it up to the viewer's imagination. And also sometimes because I ran out of time. But the times where I let go and was fine with it being quote-unquote incomplete felt kind of powerful, like I had confidence in my decisions of what to show and what not to, and also confidence in the audience to appreciate it. Exaggeration. So people have a tendency when figure drawing, and I guess drawing in general, to sort of flatten things out and make them closer to a sort of static front view and lessening twists and angles. I guess maybe because it's closer to a mental model of what a figure should be. Like when you picture a body, you know, it's standing there straight, it's got its arms at its sides, facing front. You can quite easily visualize all the different measurements from there. So if you're looking at something really weird and twisty, you kind of want to push it closer to the measurements that you're familiar with. I did tend to want my figures to be realistic for fears of getting the proportions unappealingly wrong, but I think I did a good job of not making it even flatter than reality. And there were a few figures with a short time limit where I could sort of see the energy of the pose, and I exaggerated the flow of the form, and those have a lot of life and energy to them. Gesture. Appealing gesture is sort of a combination of simplification and exaggeration with a couple of other things added in, like flow and balance. I had a few times where I'd take a long time on a pose, and because I was slowing down to show too much, it sort of got a bit stiff. Then I'd try again, and even though it might have been maybe a bit less accurate, it was a lot more energetic and appealing. The first session probably helped quite a bit because I was looking at and analyzing all the different parts before then in the second session simplifying it. One thing that I didn't really ever think about before starting this, it was in one of the lessons, was how to indicate the shadow. Like, I'd assume that if you had a long time, maybe you just go in and shade stuff, but there's a little shortcut that they had in the lessons where you, instead of shading things, you outline the shape of the shadow on the body. And what that does is it adds lines within the shape that you've indicated to show the form as well. So it makes it feel a lot more sort of fleshed out. I also did one where I tried to draw the figure by just drawing the shadow shapes, and that was very difficult because I was kind of working without landmarks and just trying to convert these shadow shapes into flat areas on the page that flowed into each other. Yeah. But the final result ended up looking quite good, so I'm happy with that. There was also a few anatomy things that drawing so many figures I noticed. I'll just quickly go over those. So the shoulders and neck don't really make an L shape. There's a cool arrangement of, like, you've got the clavicles coming down and the trapezius muscles on top of that, and then the V shape of the sternocleidomastoids, like the muscles that go from the middle of the sternum up to the sides of the head. They make a cool V shape, and that whole arrangement is a lot more appealing when you get all those details. The upper arm, the shoulder is actually like a fair amount more of the arm than I was giving it credit for, and the biceps are quite a bit smaller. I guess it depends on the build of the person, but the shoulder is a fair chunk of the upper arm. When you're doing the calves, like the lower legs, I used to indicate them with a C curve, like from the knee, a C down to the ankle, but the calves are actually weighted quite a bit towards the top end of the leg, so it makes more sense to use more of an S shape. So it bulges out towards the top and then comes back and tapers in as you get towards the lower part of the leg. I also found out that I have an instinct of drawing absolutely massive legs if I'm going quickly and not really paying too much attention to proportions. It's probably because I sort of know the curves of doing the legs, so I get a bit excited and like overdo it. But yeah, I try and keep an eye on that now. So wrapping up, I'm pretty happy I did figure eight, and I'm a little bit proud of myself that I kept up with the whole thing, though I was feeling a little bit of fatigue towards the end, but the fact that the sessions are only supposed to be 15 minutes long made it a lot easier to start, even if I ended up pausing it and going over that time most of the time. Collating and posting the sessions was almost as hard as doing the sessions themselves, as it felt like being asked to do more work after I'd already finished. So I think next time I'd try and make the collating and posting just a part of the process and just think, hey, you're not finished until you've done that bit. As you've been watching, I have recorded a fair amount of time lapses of my sessions, so I think what I'll end up doing with those is, now that I've gone over just sort of the general things that I learned, I'll just put up the raw footage with some nice background music and just have it be like a chill and draw sort of thing. So look out for those in the coming week or so, I'd say. Just something nice to put on in the background, maybe while you're doing work or hanging out or whatever. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into the benefits of drawing. And just a last shout out to Croquis Cafe and the Love Life Drawing channel for putting on the event. There'll be links to those in the description as well, and I'll catch you in the next one.